GameRanx presents the top 10 survival horror games of 2015. Are you ready to get spooked? I know I am, so let's get started off with number 10. Layers of Fear is definitely a different type of horror game. It's a psychedelic style game where you take control over an insane painter in his quest to finish his magnum opus. It's got an old century look, design, and feel, and that certainly works for the graphics that are gorgeous renderings of a haunted, creepy house. While it's not filled with jump scares and scary monsters and stuff like that, it has a haunting atmosphere that kind of sticks with you. It's one of those more psychological horror games. So like, even though you know that there aren't monsters around every corner, you're still kind of on the edge of your seat. And that's what really makes Layers of Fear special, and that's why we put it on our list. If you've ever wanted to play a game that makes you feel like you're going crazy, check this out. And at number 9, we have Fatal Frame, Maiden of Blackwater, which is a WiiU exclusive game. It's very similar to previous Fatal Frame games where players navigate areas with scary, hostile, spooky ghosts where you have to take pictures to see them. This time around, the gameplay is tied to the WiiU gamepad, which serves as your camera obscura, and it's actually kind of a cool mechanic. The game focuses around 3 protagonists, and it's pretty darn creepy. It's definitely not the best Fatal Frame game, but it's still worth checking out for its really dark atmosphere and that Japanese horror vibe that you can't really replicate anywhere else. And that being said, if you are into this, definitely go back and check out the earlier Fatal Frame games because they're even more awesome. And at number 8, we have Zombie. This is the PS4, Xbox One, and PC version of the Wii U launch game. That was probably one of the best survival horror games of the time it released. Zombie is a roguelike first-person zombie survival horror game where you go around a London haunted by a zombie infestation. The setting feels unique, as does the gameplay. The gameplay really focuses on use of your tools and inventory management. Every time you die, you wake up as a new survivor out in the world. It gets very challenging as the game goes on, as well as being a little scary at times. And those zombie tower guardsmen are awesome enemy designs because they're freaking terrifying and intense. In terms of gameplay, Zombie has some of the best around and one of the best on our list, so that's why we can definitely recommend it to you guys. At number 7, we can recommend Resident Evil Revelations 2. If you've been playing the newer Resident Evil games and kind of yearn for the past style of Resident Evil games, the Resident Evil Revelation games are probably for you. That being said, the story does go a little out there, but we do actually get to revisit the character fan favorite, Barry Burton, who is still pretty damn awesome. Things get a little dumb from time to time, but this is just classic survival horror gameplay, and it works. Not to mention the fact that you can get it on anything: PS3, PS4, Xbox One, 360, PC, or Vita. There's not many excuses to at least try and check this game out. And at number 6, speaking of Resident Evil, let's talk about Resident Evil Remastered. This is probably one of the best Resident Evil games you can play. It's a remake of the original Resident Evil, which was awesome, and now it's been remastered once again for current gen consoles and PC, and it is still just as scary, just as gorgeous, just as engaging, and just as much worth playing. Guys, you gotta check this one out. If you've never played Resident Evil, or if you've only played the newer Resident Evils, please play this game. It's one of my absolute favorites of all time, and it only looks better, crisper, and more HD, and it just has a really great sense of dread and creepiness, and it's basically where survival horror really started to pick up. So I highly recommend Resident Evil Remastered. It's definitely one of the survival horror games of 2015 you should definitely be playing. And at number 5, we have Kholat, a PC-exclusive indie game that is very special and unique. It tells a very interesting story based around the true story of the Dyatlov Pass incident, a mysterious death of 9 Russian hikers. If you were into Dear Esther, this is definitely something worth checking out because it's less of a horror game and more of an interactive, spooky story. This playable interactive story game really just nails that atmosphere, that sense of impending dread, and real absolute creepiness that I can't stress enough. Not to mention the fact that the game is narrated by Sean Bean. Are you kidding me? That's awesome. It's scarier than it sounds in how I'm describing it. It's really just down to the graphics, the atmosphere, the sound, the music, and just that dread. Check out Kholat. You might not regret it. And speaking of things you might not regret, let's talk about things that we might all regret. Five Nights at Freddy's 3 and 4. These games released this year, and we figured we'd give them a mention because they do have a lot of fans, and some people find them very scary. Five Nights at Freddy's 4 really stepped it up by changing the setting completely, and I think it worked to a pretty good effect. This is definitely a game of jump scares, so if you like them, you like getting a little kickstart to your heart, check out these games. Not to mention the fact that the character designs are really creepy, and just the general idea of these animatronics that come to life is a very spooky idea. Yeah, it's being stretched a little thin, but the games are popular for a reason, so we figured we'd give them a mention. And at number 3, we have the PlayStation 4 exclusive Until Dawn. Until Dawn is an absolute masterpiece and exercise in slasher horror. Until Dawn has some spooky moments, some dark corridors, some creepy shadows, some jump scares, but ultimately it's a very tongue-in-cheek and kind of fun adventure. It really embraces that late 90s, early 2000s slasher horror where you watch a movie about a bunch of pretty teenagers who get killed one by one. Until Dawn is basically the Heavy Rain version of that. It's an interactive story where you get to choose what happens in the game. Your decisions affect the outcome of the story and who lives and dies, and it's just so awesome, not to mention the fact that the game is absolutely gorgeous. I really can't recommend Until Dawn enough. It's definitely probably one of the biggest surprises of this year. And speaking of surprises this year, at number 2 we have Dying Light, the zombie open world adventure game that actually turned out to be pretty awesome. You run around a city overrun by zombies as a parkour master who gathers supplies and works and does things, and it's very cool. The sense of progression is really great, upgrading your weapons, upgrading your character feels awesome, and at night when the lights go out, the scarier zombies come out and the game becomes even more challenging and just downright freaky. I'm always on the edge of my seat when I play this game at night. Techland has been adding a lot of extra content to Dying Light that definitely makes playing it even more worth it now than it ever has been. And I know we're all probably getting sick of zombies, but Dying Light is a really good refresh of the formula. You're gonna have a blast, I promise. And at number 1, let's talk about Soma, the game from the creators of Amnesia. So Soma does have a slightly similar presence where you explore a place, hide from spooky monsters, and basically figure out an adventure on your own. But this time around, the game is set in a secret underwater research facility, and you're suddenly thrust there with no idea how you got there, and it's really cool, really psychological, and visually amazing. The game goes in a lot of places that I don't really want to spoil, but it has some elements of cyberpunk and other aspects of horror that I really didn't expect it to touch on, but it's definitely worth playing through to the end because it probably has one of the best stories on this list. And the underwater setting actually makes it to be really creepy. It's almost like the creepy parts of BioShock turned up to 11. And if that doesn't sound awesome and scary, I don't know what to tell you, but that's why it's on our list, because Soma is pretty cool. So guys, those were the top 10 horror games of 2015. This list has a pretty vast variety of games, but we like them all, we put them on our list, and we want to know what you think of them down in the comments below. There's also more out there, so let us know in the comments what survival horror and horror games you've been playing in 2015. And of course, if you did have a good time, maybe learned a thing or two about a new game, click the like button because that helps us out a lot. Subscribing is the best thing you can do though, because we put out videos every single day. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.